So I'm always going to look at it because there's new ways of thinking, there's new technologies, there's new information that comes, and we want to be able to adjust and iterate on that.
My name is Matt Reiner, managing partner at Capital Investment Advisor, CEO of Wellness Strategies, an author, podcast host, and also a speaker to the wealth management community. My mission is to help every family in this country have access and be served by a human financial advisor. That we all have to live in the moment and not try to force progress too quickly. Let it happen and commit to a long-term strategy in your life, in your business, and in your investment portfolio.
And now, your host and my dad, Matt Reiner.
Welcome to another episode of the FutureProof Advisor podcast. We are exploring what is necessary to ensure that you and your firm and your clients are future-proofed for what is to come, which is all unknown. So that's why we're exploring it together as a unit, you and me. And in order to do this, we must strengthen how I believe it. We must strengthen our minds. We must create leverage to allow us the opportunity to explore, innovate, and continue to create a more robust future. It's mind, it's leverage, it's innovation. You can't just jump to innovation if you don't have the mindset and you don't have the leverage or the time, because then it will fall and fail, and then you won't go back to it. So I'm trying to help go through each pillar. Today, though, we are going to go through, it's a mindset one, I would say. It's a mindset one. Here's the thing for today. Knowing a lot is a hindrance to action. Knowing a lot is a hindrance to action. I know, we grew up in this world where we're meant to know everything, where the people that know everything are the smartest people. The smartest people make the most money. The most money gets to do the most things. They're the most powerful. So shouldn't we know everything? Well, that's the thing. It does seem counterintuitive, especially for a podcast host who produces a podcast to help provide insights to others, to know more, and to someone that is curious, that loves to learn more. But the challenge in our world today is not access to information or even knowledge. It's the action on that information and on that knowledge. And we are in a content consumption driven world. Yet I don't believe our action relative to consumption is equivalent. I think it's an uneven balance between knowledge and action. And what I'm hoping to do is inspire us to take more action. That's what's led me to explore the power of naivety. Naivety in a world obsessed with more information. That is interesting to me, and that's what we're going to explore today. So today we're going to explore multiple points of naivety and why I think it's so powerful in a world that's obsessed with knowledge consumption. There is balance that has to be had. Balance is necessary in everything we do in life. So we're going to explore that today, the balance between productive and reckless naivety. We're also going to look at the root cause of inaction with information. Why is it that we can't act when we have the information to act? We're also going to look at why the old adage of older and wiser may not actually be accurate. I'm sorry, I am also getting older, but it may just not be accurate what we know. And we'll look at what we need to do to find that balance between information and action. Again, if there's one theme to take away, it's balance. I'm going to go unbalanced to help us find the balance that we need. The problem with knowing something is not the knowledge itself. Rather, it's the action taken based on the information, right? The abundance, and some would say overwhelming nature of how much content and information that we are akin to and that's available to us. The theory would be that there would be more action would be taken on this excessive information, that the ability of what we are doing and creating would be greater. Yet knowing information and having more choices actually, although it seems positive, it really creates decision paralysis. It creates dissatisfaction and it creates anxiety. It's a really interesting kind of loop that it creates. And we'll explore that today of why that happens, because it's a vicious cycle. We get more choices via more information. We become overwhelmed with making the right decision then. We have all this information. Now we need to make the right decision, right? We spend time getting more information to help us make what we is perceiving to be the right choice. And then we don't make a decision. And then we get dissatisfied that we haven't made a decision. We wasted all this time getting all this information, inability to make a decision. We get frustrated at how much time it has taken that we haven't been able to do something, or we make a decision and we regret it right away. And then we become dissatisfied because we don't know if we made the right decision or not, or was sitting and not doing. Did we look at the right information sources to get the information? This person knew information that we didn't know. The reality is that you're not going to be able to get all the information. The cycle then continues. And I won't speak for you all, but the reason I know this so clearly is because I live this every single day. I'm right there with all of you. This is a challenge and a cycle that is straight from the Matt Reiner playbook. It happens all the time, and it's just human nature. I thought I was alone in that cycle, and I have realized that I have many peers. I think every single person out there is my peer in this, but it can feel lonely. And that's why we're going to explore how do we get above and beyond that curve and going from there. So, in Atlanta about 2 months ago, spring sprung. Spring sprung. The weather was beautiful. And I remember the day. It was turning from winter to spring. And it was one of those kind of Chamber of Commerce days in Atlanta. It was the weekend, so you could actually enjoy it. The Chamber of Commerce days, when you have them and you're sitting in your office, you're always so frustrated because you're working instead of exploring that Chamber of Commerce day. The pollen wasn't out yet. The temperature was ideal. The sun was shining. And for us as a family, our schedule, which was something relatively unknown to us, was light. We didn't have much going on. It was the perfect day for a neighborhood stroll. So my kids, 5 and 3, they have just really discovered the love for scootering. As much as I've wanted them to scooter a lot more, they love it. And especially going downhill super fast. They love going downhill super fast. Uphill is another story that we have to usually carry the scooter, but downhill super fast is their MO. They love it. So this morning, a couple months ago, we grabbed the scooters and set off for the local farmer's market. And the farmer's market is literally 0.2 miles. It's down our neighborhood street onto a major street, and you're at the farmer's market. And as we walked through the neighborhood, my wife and I talked about how nice it was to finally have our kids not having to be pushed in the stroller or, complaining about walking. Like, they were ahead of us scootering. It was like, I don't know, what you would see in a movie, I guess. And it was like, oh, this was a great day. Then we reached this curve. And the curve is going from the neighborhood street onto the main road. And I've seen it before, and I know what the sidewalk looks like. It's an older sidewalk, so it's got cracks, it's jagged, and right away, and I knew it was a slight curve. And it's downhill, which they love. Downhill, slight curve, cracks, rigid sidewalk. That all in my mind plays out to be a bad case scenario when you have a main street right next to it. And so the first thing that I do is I tense up, of course, and I yell ahead, stay on the sidewalk, be careful, right? Did the parenting thing, right? Give me the gold star. I'm the parent, right? My son, who is he likes to challenge everything. He may be a lawyer when he grows up. I don't know. He turns around confused and yelled, isn't there a sidewalk up there? And I was like, yes, of course. To him, nothing has changed. The path was the same, just a new street, a new stretch of pavement. He kept going carefree. I kept watching, calculating, anticipating, knowing that the edge was coming this way. And what happens if the wheel goes one way? But here's the reality, nothing happened. They continued to roll on. They laughed. They were still way ahead of us. And just as they were a block earlier. As I watched them, it was that moment I realized experience is valuable. But experience also makes us cautious, sometimes too cautious. As adults, we gain wisdom and we gain knowledge, but we also accumulate fears and risks and reasons not to act. Just like that situation, I would have wanted them to pick up their scooters and walk. They wanted to continue on, and they were right. Would they be right 100 times? I think so, but I was fearful. And in some cases, this knowledge and wisdom and understanding of the risks and the fears keeps us safe. But in others, in many situations, it holds us back. And that, I think, is where the power of naivety comes. So let's first start exploring with too many choices. Too many choices leads us to take no action, not better action. That's the thing. There is a diminishing marginal return on choices. We have this natural desire to see all the options that are out there. It helps us feel more comfortable making a decision where we don't know if the outcome is going to be right or wrong. So we want as many choices as possible. It gives us this inherent sense of certainty in an uncertain path, an uncertain decision that we don't know the outcome. But the problem is more choices lead us to analyze more information, more scenarios, and ultimately it paralyzes us from making a decision because of conflicting and overlapping information. And the more information that we have to look at and analyze and think through, it leads to and causes decision fatigue, which then means that we just don't take action. There was an interesting study out there that I think helps to show this and picture this a little bit more. It's the JAM study by Iyengar and Lepper in 2000. The JAM study, not like jam music, like jam, the jam that you put on your toast, right? Of course, the jam. In this study, researchers set up a display in a grocery store with either 6 or 24 types of jam. One display had 6 types of jam. Another display had 24 types of jam. The larger selection attracted more attention. Of course, who doesn't need to select from 24 types of jam? I need to make the right decision. I need as many options. I don't know if I'm going to like apricot or strawberry or grape, but I've only eaten strawberry in my life. But who knows? There may be a new form. So they all went to the 24 types. Yet, people were 10 times more likely to purchase jam when given only 6 choices. 24 choices attracted more people. 6 choices attracted more action. I love that. That shows the power of it. I love this concept known as Hicks' Law. Hicks' Law is a principle that states that the time it takes to make a decision increases logarithmically with the number of choices available. What this means is that we are increasing the multiples, not additional linearly, as we make decisions with more options. It makes sense. If we have to go analyze 5 decisions or 5 choices, we have to go find information on those 5 choices to then make that decision. But if we now need 10 choices, now we have to go analyze 10 choices, which means 2x the amount of information. Each of those pieces of information has a lot more, and you get the point, right? That beyond a certain point, each additional choice adds disproportionately less value and more complexity to decision-making process. That's why it's better to say to someone, what's your rating 1 through 5 than 1 through 10. That's why they made phone number 7 instead of 15 numbers, because it's harder to remember. It's a lot more mental fatigue that goes on there. Jeff Bezos of Amazon, he found and understood this. He introduced what's called the 70% rule. He believes that waiting for 100% certainty on a decision is too long and it's too slow. And he's right. The reality is that you'll never get to 100%, even if you think you will. In Bezos' mind, he thinks that most decisions should be made with about 70% of the information. Otherwise, you risk analysis paralysis. So as we talk about later, this is spot on, right? Information provides us context, but eventually the next best piece of information is the outcome and the results of the action that we take using the information that we currently have. There's a point where just that curve just flattens and starts to diminish, and it becomes an N as opposed to flattening out, right? You want it to go up and then level out and then keep going up. When you think about information to action scenario, if you think about it you're graphically inclined on that side. Here's an example that I will close out with on this scenario, right? Think about the ease of choosing heads or tails. It's a quick decision. You have 2 choices, and it's very simple. But choosing what city to live in within any state is really difficult. Go choose any city in the whole country to live in. That's going to create massive amount of anxiety and decision fatigue and likely paralysis analysis. I bet you it's going to be hard for you to decide on one because you're going to have natural regret. Fewer choices creates quicker action. Action, we have to remember, is not the end state. It's just the next state that gives us more information for the next decision. If we can get that mentality, we can make decisions faster and take action and learn more quicker. And secondly, that I wanted to talk about, in my view, naivety should drive us to take action to start. Naivety, just to be naive for your entire life and for throughout an entire process, is not the right way. Naivety, in my mind, is the gas to get us started, not the engine to get you where you need to go, right? Naivety allows us to have a beginner's mindset, which is so integral when it comes to allowing us to have the opportunity for action, as opposed to the opportunity why not to do something. We tend to believe that we need to understand why we shouldn't do something as opposed to why we should do something. We are fearful of making that mistake, of making the wrong decision. but the best and most successful people in the world all took action. And they never took the right action the first time. They learned from every action. And they have this concept of the beginner's mindset. It's a Zen Buddhist concept, and it's known as Shoshin. The entire concept, I can't say that 5 times fast, but Shoshin is the concept. And it's based on this idea that approaching life and learning and problem solving from the mentality of being a beginner will open you up to possibilities that the experienced mind would overlook. And there's multiple concepts that I've seen on this with like idea the curse of knowledge. When you go and explain to someone how to make a PB&J sandwich or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you miss a lot of steps that you take for granted because you have experience doing it. But if you tell someone, like if I have a 5-year-old and I want them to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, they're not going to be able to do it based on the steps that I provide them because they've never done it before. And so you have to really have that beginner's mindset of what are they thinking? Like how to hold the knife, how to open up the peanut butter, how to undo the bread, how to open the fridge, like all the steps, pieces that goes into it, right? The more that we know, the more likely we tend to be to default on past experiences, right? Our future action is based on past outcomes. It says, despite new information and past performances not being a predictor of future results, we tend to lean on the past performance. Whatever happened in the past is going to happen again, even though that we know that that's not the case, right? We often overlook new possibilities. We overlook the idea of what may be. We always say this is what's going to be. That's a different way to phrase it. What may be is a beginner's mindset. What is going to be is a non-beginner's mindset, an experienced mindset. That's what it is, right? And we fall into rigid patterns, rigid thinking patterns. Because X happened, we'll take a Y action. We've seen this before and things won't be different this time. And so we're just going to continue that until things are different and then we're stuck, right? I think about the beginner's mindset and the mentality of kids, right? This is all about how kids view the world. My kids today are unaware of the risks and challenges of the world. They're unaware of the cracks in the sidewalk and the curve in the sidewalk. They're unaware of all of that. They see it through a completely different lens. They are risk-free. Yet kids, and it's shown, data has shown it, kids become more conservative over time as they become more aware of potential outcomes. It happens. We've all seen it, right? As kids become more aware, just think about if you have kids or if you have nephews or nieces. Think about your kid pre going to education, going to schooling system, and post going to the schooling system. Before going to the schooling system and understanding that there's structure and grades and you have to do this to be able to go to the next level and move linearly, they are risk-free. When they get into a structure where they know that there's a good grade and a bad grade, stress and anxiety ramps up, conservatism ramps up because they're fearful of the negative downfall. As kids, they don't know that. As students, they start to learn that. And as adults, we start to fear it. And that's where the challenge really becomes. So as in all the case with all things in life, we don't want to just go and be naive throughout. There's a balance. Think about naivety of being the starting point, not the ending point. I'd like to think of it as like a sailboat example, right? A sailboat doesn't know exactly where the wind will take it, but the wind itself is what gets it moving, right? Naivety is the wind. It fills your sails with energy and optimism. We need more optimism in this world. That's a whole nother podcast. Even if you don't fully know the route. Experience is the rudder. It helps you navigate once you're started. That's where you experience it. And we'll talk about some examples of people that use the wind the right way and people that use the wind the wrong way so you can balance this concept there. That leads me perfectly into the next section, which is all about productive versus reckless naivety. There is a difference between productive and reckless naivety. Here's the point. The Wright brothers had no formal engineering background, or let me call it aerospace engineering background or experience. They were in the business of bicycles. That's what they were in the business of. But they believed that humans could fly. And so they set out to do this and learn through experimentation. They went through thousands of experiments to figure out how to make the plane fly. But they ultimately identified the challenge with flight, which trained engineers never saw. They overlooked it every time. They theorized that the issue with flight was a balance problem, while the trained engineers We're looking at it from a propulsion problem, meaning pushing it faster. How do you get the engine and the inertia moving faster to get the plane in the air to take off? And what the Wright brothers identified was that was the wrong problem. It wasn't propulsion, it was balance. And ultimately, they were the ones that made the first flight in 1903 because they looked at the problem from a different angle. Think about it. Riding a bike is a balance problem. It's not a propulsion problem. You have to figure out how to balance to ride it. They came in from a different way of light and a different frame of reference that allowed them. But these great engineers trying to create flight were coming in from what they knew. And what they knew inhibited their ability to see what was unknown that would solve the problem. That's where naivety can play a really good hand. That's productive naivety. Now let's go on the other side. On the other hand, we have Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos, right? Holmes believed that she could revolutionize blood testing. Yet as the data came, and that's the optimism. That's naivety. That naivety is okay, right? But where it becomes reckless is here. As the data came back and failure stacked up, she didn't adjust. She pushed forward by covering it up. She was acting naive to what the data was saying. Holmes had optimism and naivety, but had no accountability or willingness to iterate on that naivety. And that's the difference. Productive naivety is being the Wright brothers and iterating based on new information, right? They ran multiple experiences, had different theses, and built up an idea and a solution based off of that. Reckless is Elizabeth Holmes, who pushed forward despite new information and pushed against her information and her vision. She had the vision and she was blinded by her vision. And that is reckless naivety. Finding this balance of when to be naive and when to use experience is really challenging. It's not easy. I think, the root of doing it, though, is to be aware of the tendency to lean on experience only or to create choice overload, right? We have to invest in our own self and our own awareness. And I have to have worked on this for years to say, well, why do I need another choice? What is the value of another choice for me? Or why am I not acting? What is holding me back from acting? And then you look in and you see that it's a fear. It's a fear of making the wrong decision. But that fear resides when you say, I'm going to act and adjust. I'm going to act and iterate. I'm going to act and evolve. I'm not going to act and it be my finality. Your action is not your finality. Your action is your next step to more information. I think it's a mentality shift that has to happen where you can see the challenge, but take the action to determine more information on that challenge as opposed to theorizing what it is. Which is why the answer to being better at taking action through naivety is experimentation. Experimentation reshapes our perspective of naivety, right? It changes the landscape of how we think about failure as well, right? To build naivety into any organization, it starts with having that experimental mindset. It's a mindset that looks at the status quo and says, well, how can it be different, right? Looks within their industry and says, why is it that way? Why can't it be this way? It's the person that looks outside the industry and says, well, they do it this way. What happens if we do it another way? How might we make this better? Or how might we incorporate this into our business? And instead of turning the entire ship, which is not what I'm suggesting, go after a new idea in a small scale experiment. Test it out. Try it out to gain more information and then iterate upon completion of the experiment. Naivety drives this action to experimentation. Too often, we think that we have to know all the answers before we enter into any action. Our world has trained us incorrectly, and I'm sorry about that. And what I'm trying to do is help you see there's another way of it, right? There are smart people that are highly thoughtful in all of their decisions, but their basis for it is that they've also taken action to understand that thoughtful interpretation of those decisions. I think that there is a difference between smart people and successful people. Smart people have all the information. Successful people are the ones that are running experiments all the time and adjusting their thesis in real time based on real actionable data. They're not theorizing, they're doing. And that is the difference. And they're doing it in small scale ways. The Wright brothers showed us the path. Like I said, they did thousands of experiments, Small, tiny experiments. Well, I guess it was on a plane, so maybe it was a big experiment on a plane. But small experiments, right? Look at the Beatles, for instance. They didn't have any formal musical training, but they revolutionized music. Why? Because they experimented with unconventional chord progressions and studio techniques that nobody else in the business was doing because they saw it from a different lens. But they were testing things out. And I'll tell you right now, everything that the Beatles produced was not everything that they actually recorded. A lot of what they recorded probably sucked. It was probably terrible. But when you make it a small scale experiment, experiments are meant to fail. Actions maybe are not meant to because of how we're trained in school. So if you say, I'm just doing an experiment and I failed, everybody's like, oh, that's cool. Good job. Like, what'd you learn? Oh, I went and took this action and it failed. It's like, well, you're not good at your job. See how the mental shift can help change and open up the mindset to allow us to go try something different? That is what the ultimate goal is. Here's the point. A baby doesn't learn to walk by studying biomechanics or planning the perfect step. They just try. They wobble, they fall, and they adjust. Every failure, each failure gives them more data until they master balance. They don't see falling as failure. They see it as learning. And that's the mindset that we need. They're naive about it. They're not able to understand it. What happens if we were to approach life in a similar way to go learn through action? Maybe we would find our own balance as well. I think that life is full of moderation. It's full of balance, consumption, everything it may be. Too much of one thing can lead to negatives on another thing. Within our professional and personal lives, too much experience creates rigidity, closed-mindedness, and ultimately lack of desire to evolve. Experience serves us a great purpose. I'm not here to say it doesn't. But I'm here to also say that naivety does as well. The world is constantly evolving around us. The resources, the demands of others, the desires of others, all of it. And the only way for us to keep up is to evolve and iterate. To stay up to date and to evolve isn't one-sided. Information is important, but the answer is not more information. We must use that information for action and then pair consumed information with real-world insights based on action to move forward. The simple and easy next step is to go and consume more, learn more, because it's right in front of us. It's in the palm of our hands. It's all so easy. But the best next step is to go and act, learn, iterate, and do it again. We must be confident in what we already know. You already know a lot. Trust your instincts. Have confidence in yourself and who we are, that we don't need more and we just need to do. Because the future-proofed advisors are those that are doing that. They're taking action because they're using that information to learn the next step. And that is what's going to separate firms and organizations and the value that's delivered to families between the great ones and the not so great ones, the valuable ones and the not so valuable ones, the ones that are able to raise fees and the ones that have to cut fees. That is the difference in this business. So take action, learn, don't turn the whole ship. Take a small bit of the ship and paint it a different color and see what happens. That's the ultimate goal. So if you enjoyed this episode, forward it to a friend, like the episode, leave a comment. Tell me, even if you hated it, tell me, please. I want to make this better. I want to make this valuable. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so that you're alerted of all of our new episodes each week. Follow us on the FutureProof Advisor podcast and email to get all of our AI content and weekly content on all things mind, leverage, innovation, AI. And before you leave, be sure to answer our one question poll, which is linked in the summary of today's podcast. It's a simple question. What do you feel is the biggest challenge with being more naive? With that, I say thank you. Thank you for spending some time with me today. It means the world to me, and I'll never take it for granted. Go out there and be part of the change that betters our industry. Stay well, be well, and keep exploring.